Okay, we're live. So this isn't going to surprise any of the Sidewalk Talk listeners that know Tracy Rubel, because they know that I have mild ADD, and things like getting links correctly and dates and times right is not my forte. So I sent Jillian the incorrect link. So it is not Jillian's fault that we're a few minutes late. It's mine. Jillian, it happens. Kelsey said you were really, I said, oh man, I had to cancel because I had something with my kid and then I forgot something. And she goes, Jillian's going to understand. I said, all right, cool. So I found you on LinkedIn through Kelsey Crow, who has been on our podcast before. And then actually I realized I talked to Joe Keohane, who's written a book about talking to strangers. And he talked about you a year ago, but I was packing up my house to move to Germany. So I didn't even have time to there's this researcher that researches talking to strangers, but when you're packing a house with 2 kids, it's not something you're going to follow up on. I got to know.
I lost a check once when I was moving house. It was like, I can't put this in the bank now. Like too many things happening because of moving.
You didn't lose a check. You lost money.
I lost money. It was from my parents. So it was okay, but I felt horrible. It was like many years later, I found this check, and I was like, sorry.
Wow. Yeah. Well, let's toot your horn a little bit. I want to say a little bit about who you are and what you do. So, you're a researcher and a scholar and professor who studies psychology, teaches psychology, but your forte is really thinking about how to improve our social interactions with one another. And you really like studying talking to strangers.
I do. Yeah. And I don't even know how I got here in a way. Yeah. So, I'm an introvert. And so it still to this day surprises me that this is what I do and what I study.
Well, so we probably should go down that path. Like, how did this materialize, that this became your field of study, and how did you're a Canadian living in the UK. Just give us a little bit of your story.
Well, there's always multiple reasons for things, right? But one of the stories as to how I got here involves a hot dog lady. So I started doing a master's degree in psychology, but it was in music cognition, so not related to this research at all. And the campus I was at was downtown Toronto, big city. And the lab was in one building, but my supervisor, his office was in a different building. And when I walked between the 2 buildings on the street corner, there was a hot dog stand. And this lady worked at the hot dog stand, and somehow, unintentionally, it became a habit to every time I walked past, I would look for her and I would smile and wave, and she would wave back. And it just felt really good. And so when I started my PhD, I may be inventing how the conversation went, but I was in a lab that studied happiness. That's what I really kind of had intended to study when I started. The psychology was positive psychology. And I feel like my advisor said, what makes you happy? And when I, in terms of helping me figure out what I might want to study for my PhD. And I just mentioned the hot dog lady. And I wasn't sure if this was, just a thing, is it just me or is it a thing, but it made me, when I started the master's degree, I had a career. I was going back to school. I was 10 years older than everyone else. I wasn't sure if I was smart enough to be there, so there was all this uncertainty, and having the hot dog lady know who I was and have these little moments just felt incredible. It made me feel like I really belonged there. And so it was a really powerful thing for me. And that's how I got started studying this.
Wow. And tell me how the move to the UK became part of that trajectory. So you meet the hot dog lady in Toronto, and now you're in the UK. How did that happen?
That's just academia for you. There's so few jobs that you take them where you can get them. So I got my PhD actually at UBC in Vancouver in Canada. And then I was looking for a postdoctoral position. And I was incredibly lucky, and something came up at the University of Cambridge that was a really great fit. So I moved to the UK thinking it would just be for a year and a bit to do this contract position at Cambridge. And then I got a permanent position at the University of Essex. So I'm still here.
Wow. How long has it been?
6 years now. 6 years at Essex. So longer in the UK, coming up on 8 years, I think.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. So you're a Brit now.
Yep, part Brit. Can't you tell from the accent?
You don't have the accent.
I don't have an accent, but I do sort of make different word choices to align with how people here would say things. So I probably
you ring someone rather than call them, right?
Exactly.
And your friends are your mates, not your friends.
I talk about putting petrol in the car instead of gas, and talk about the rubbish, the bin lorries coming by to collect the garbage, and
and the boot rather than the trunk.
I don't bother with that one, but and trousers, because you really shouldn't say pants, because that means something very different here, right?
Well, and I'm not going to say the naughty thing that I'm not going to say the naughty thing that I just learned from one of my friends when we were walking around San Francisco. She's like, "Why does everything say fanny packs?" And I'm like, "You don't know what a fanny pack is?" She goes, no. You guys can look that up. They're listening. All right, I want to get juicy into some of your research. So, what do you think I'd be shocked about to find? What were you shocked about as you started studying this idea that we should? You said we should be talking to strangers, and here's why we don't.
I guess one thing that surprised me was, I thought, okay, I'm going to try and understand why people are so worried about talking to strangers. After my first set of research that found, that people are really in a good mood after they have even a tiny little chat with someone. So I thought, okay, why are people not doing it if it makes us feel good? And, clearly there's just a lot of things that people worry about. So I set out to understand what those things were, hoping that would turn into, okay, maybe I can help fix them. And then people will feel more able to reach out. But I guess I'm surprised by just the range of things, the number of barriers, psychological and otherwise, that, hold people back from talking to each other. And now it feels in some ways like I could fix one thing, but another one would pop up. So it's a bit like whack-a-mole, you hit one and then it just pops up somewhere else. So.
Well, it's interesting that we're having this conversation today. Maybe you could help whack-a-mole one of the challenge. I just talked to a stranger, which is unusual these days for me because I'm no longer in my native country and I don't speak the native language. But I had a week off work 2 weeks ago, a staycation, was sitting by the river here in Heidelberg, and a man sits down. He asks, "Can I sit on the bench next to you?" in German. I said, "Sure." And I'm reading poetry because, as one does on their vacation, sitting by the river, one reads poetry. So I'm reading poetry. He sees that I'm reading in English. And he starts to make small talk with me. Now, I love small talk. I'm lonely as all get out because I don't have any friends here. So I'm like, great. Oh my God, somebody's talking to me. This is fantastic. However, as a woman, having an older man sit down, you can't tell, is this going to be a grandpa, young woman conversation, or is this man going to proposition me? And it did lean towards the latter. And so sometimes I don't engage with some people because I don't want to be propositioned.
Yeah.
And is that one of the whack-a-mole things?
I hear the opposite from men too, that men are worried about reaching out and talking to a woman because they worry that women are going to feel that way. I don't really know what to say to that. I mean,
I just was wondering if your research found some things about that. Give me the litany of the list.
I completely shied away from anything to do with that in my research so far. Trying to not look at anything that has dating overtones. But yes, I realize that it is definitely an issue and a thing that comes up over and over. But I'd like to live in a world where we can have cross-sex interactions without there being those overtones. So I still encourage people to do it in a respectful way without harassing anyone. And, I guess people can, if you want to reach out to someone and try to make sure that you're not making them feel uncomfortable, there's things you can do, right? Like you can keep your distance and, that kind of thing. So I don't want to discourage people from talking to half of the world's population. So
no, and I think that, truth be told, I have some friends that are very good at turning down propositions for the sake of being able to continue connecting. But we just should be able to have good boundaries and say, hey, I'm interested in a friendship.
Yeah.
So question for you. What are some of the things, though, that you did research that prevents us from actually engaging? Because I'm a weirdo. I talk to strangers all the time, and Germans think I'm nuts. They think I'm absolutely nuts because this is not part of the culture here.
Do they get past that though if you keep talking? Because I in my head, people think if I talk to them, it's not the norm. We don't do this talking to strangers thing. So I think the first thing in their mind is, do I know you? And then they're like, uh-oh, I don't know you. What do you want? Like, do you want to harm me? Are you going to hit on me? Are you asking for money? Like, what's happening here? And then if you can be a little bit patient, usually get to the third stage, which is just, oh, you're just being friendly. Okay, let's have a chat. So that this is not a research-based thing. This is just what I have in my head. I think this is what's going on. And so I think you do have to be a little patient to realize that people are going to think like, what is happening here? And they need a second to kind of get used to the idea that it's possible for someone to just have a chat and be friendly.
Mm-hmm. I have to laugh because we just had a comment from a German from Togetherness Hub, Janis Kuhlencord. He said, some Germans love your spirit, Tracy. I'm glad to know that. But there is this quality in which you had talked about beforehand that you're an introvert. And I've certainly gotten lots of questions from introverts. Like, I don't need connection. I don't need to talk to strangers. But you said, I feel strongly that introverts do need to talk to strangers. Tell me everything in your brain about that one.
I mean, so I've tested in my data whether there's any kind of difference in the effects that I'm seeing for introverts versus extroverts. So, what my research shows over and over is that people are far more fearful than they need to be. So people before a conversation predict that all sorts of horrible things are going to happen. But if I ask them after they have a conversation, they say, oh, actually, it went a lot better than I thought. And none of those things that I worried about actually happened. And that none of that depends on your level of extroversion. So it's not like only extroverts are enjoying these conversations. It's really everybody who's benefiting. But yeah, I'm definitely an introvert. I don't understand entirely how this is something that I enjoy. I think it comes down to, we have this association with small talk and how it's awkward. And I think for me, it's more awkward when it's someone that you have to see over and over again. And you have to, every time you see them, come up with stuff to say to them. The thing that I really enjoy is just going up to a stranger in the park, having a couple minutes of conversation and then walking away and never seeing them again. That actually suits me. And I think in a way, I break all the rules by talking to people on the tube in London. Like, you just don't do that. But I think it actually helps as an introvert, because if I don't talk to someone, being on the tube is a very overwhelming thing. It's noisy, it's crowded, there's so much going on. And if I can turn to the person beside me and just have a little chat, I can block out everything else. And that is actually helpful for me. And then, if I'm in a social situation where there's a lot of people, that's not my preferred environment. I don't like to be, in a big group of people at a party or that kind of thing, a social gathering. But I enjoy people. I enjoy talking to people. But again, I can block out all the noise by connecting with one person. And so, I have to come up with strategies sometimes, even though I do this research and I find over and over again that people enjoy it. And I know that I personally enjoy it. Doesn't mean I don't still get kind of nervous about it and, think, oh, but I don't really want to. So I think it's possible to know that you'll enjoy it and still not want to do it, which is a little bit puzzling. But I can sort of trick myself into doing it somehow by remembering that it's also a pro-social act. So if it's a party, I will look for the person who's standing on their own and I will go and talk to them. And then I can feel like, I'm doing something nice for them, as well as, knowing in the back of my mind that I'm going to enjoy it and benefit from it too. So.
You're willing to be uncomfortable to reach out and make connections.
I guess that's true. I think I know that it'll get past that uncomfortable part. Like I know it'll be uncomfortable for the first minute or two, but my experience tells me that we'll be able to get over that and have a pleasant experience almost all the time.
Yeah. So why do you want us to do this? What's your hope? Why is it that you're on this hunt for us to really start talking? Because talking to strangers.
I mean, I think it's partly that it's something that I have grown to enjoy so much. And I just think it's so much fun. I've learned so many things from talking to different people. I've found new books to read or new trails to walk, or learned about a new restaurant, or just heard about different places and different kinds of people than I ever would have if I hadn't done this. So there's that kind of informational benefit, there's mood benefits, there's these feelings of just being part of the community, feeling connected to other people. And so there's just all these benefits that I've gained from doing this, as well as just confidence. And I think, building social skills in this way kind of spills over into all sorts of other ways too, so in a way it's I feel like I've made this discovery almost of something that's like this easy, free, fast thing that we can do every day that is wonderful. And so part of me just kind of wants to give that away and show other people how much they can benefit from it as well. And then in addition to that, I think it not only has benefits for you, but it has benefits for the people you're talking to as well. And so that's something that's really struck me during the pandemic. So I live across the street from a park and I go for a walk almost every day. And it really struck me that I can do something really kind during this difficult time when people are really anxious by just smiling at people, just making eye contact, just saying hello. It can make such a big difference. I mean, I know it makes a difference for me. One day I was walking in the park and I was super just grumpy and upset about something that is, of course, now completely forgotten. But that day it was a big deal. And someone was that person for me. They just looked at me and smiled, and it was a tiny, tiny thing, but it was enough to sort of break that negative cycle that was going on in my head and help me start to feel a little bit better. So I just think it's a really powerful thing, and that's good for us, but also something we can do for other people. I think the sense of belonging is a gift that you can give to other people. You can show people that they belong. You can give that gift of belonging to people, and that's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. We had a question come in. Is there an amount of time that this talking to strangers must occur for there to be these positive experiences or benefits?
I don't think so, not necessarily. But I mean, it's hard to, so I think a lot of these conversations are nothing special. It's just a, hi, how you doing? Nice day. That's it kind of thing. That feels nice. I think the accumulation of those moments feels really nice. So even the one conversation like that isn't going to change your day and make you walk away feeling good. I think knowing that you could always have that little tiny moment of connection with all the people you're walking past feels good. So I feel like the accumulation in that case matters more than the individual conversations. But I've had some individual conversations that have been amazing. I think usually they're probably a tiny bit longer than that because, if you want to, learn something new about someone, it sometimes takes a bit longer to get to that. But I don't think there's any particular amount of time.
Have you ever been in a situation where the conversation went longer than you wanted and you were like,
Mm-hmm.
I'd like this conversation to end. How'd you handle that? Because I also think that's a barrier. Some people are afraid like, oh, I'm going to get cornered by someone and not be able to get out of this.
Yes. And I'm really good at starting
conversations. I think I've been the one that's cornered people, just to be clear. We're like, get this girl away from me.
I do think we have to be conscious of that and sort of read people's body language and be willing to stop if it looks like they're uncomfortable. But I'm pretty good at starting conversations now. I've become good at it with practice over time. But I still don't feel at all comfortable about ending them. Now, usually the kind of conversations I have, they just naturally stay short, because if I'm walking past someone in the park and I stop for a couple of minutes, it doesn't tend to last very long. Or, I'm usually doing it in the middle of my work day. And so I just need to get back to work. So it just limits the time. Or if you're on the tube or something, it's limited by how long you're on the tube for. So but I did talk to someone on the train once, and he just started kind of moaning about something and just kept complaining about his work for, I don't know, 40 minutes or something. And I didn't know how to, how to shut it down. And I thought, okay, he needs someone to talk to. Maybe this is helping him. But yeah, I could have benefited from a way to end that conversation. But there's new research on ending conversations and how difficult it is, and how only about 2% of the time does a conversation end at the moment that's considered perfect by both parties. So it almost never happens that you're going to get that ending at exactly the right moment. So that's freeing in a way. You maybe don't even bother trying to figure it out, because you don't. I think one of the problems just in general is that you can't read other people's minds, right? So we don't know what they're thinking about us, and we tend to think it's more negative than it actually is. We don't know if they actually want to end the conversation, but we might think that they do because, again, the negative voice in our head. So just remember that you can't really read other people's minds, and just end it at a time that you think makes sense. I think I would advise to try and be patient. It does take some time to get into a nice conversation. And so there's that awkwardness at the beginning that we were talking about. So you want to be a bit patient and give it a chance. But then if it's not working, so I've taught some how to talk to strangers workshops, and people brainstorm and they can come up with hundreds of ways to start conversations. But generally how people end a conversation is by lying. They will say, I need to go to the bathroom, or I need to make a phone call, or I'm going to go get a drink at the bar, or whatever. Like, people just generally lie. And I think that's kind of okay. It's a white lie. And if that's what you need to do to feel comfortable, it's fine. But every workshop I've taught, there's been at least one person who says, I just tell people thanks for the conversation, and then I move on. And people go, oh, you can do that. And so I think we're just really kind of fearful. We don't want to offend people. So I guess what I would say is, just acknowledge conversations are guaranteed. It's going to end at some point, right? So it doesn't have to feel like a really negative or awkward thing if you decide you want to end it, and you can just do it politely and walk away.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of questions coming.
Unless you're stuck on a train.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions coming. I'm going to invite you to go back in, because I don't want to get in my head. I'll get in my head and lose my connection to you through my heart. But I wanted to, I think this idea, I have this different lens because I'm a therapist, and we have all these funky things because of our own attachment system, right? That has us, proximity seek and want to come real close. Because if someone starts to feel attached to you, they're not going to want to let you go. And it just made me think of this. We've had some really interesting experiences on the sidewalk, I'll just say. I remember one time we had a listener that did not feel comfortable setting a boundary because he felt like he was abandoning this person, but the person disrobed and took off all of their clothes, and we're sitting there completely nude.
Oh my goodness.
Talking to them. And so I said to him, if you're comfy with that, then be my guest.
Wow.
If you were to think about the impact on mental health, because it's Mental Health Awareness Month right now, what is your research shown is the impact on the mental health of people who engage regularly in a practice of talking more to strangers? Is that part of your study?
It's not something I've looked at. I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I don't really have any background in mental health. I mean, what the benefits that I've looked at in the research are basically mood benefits and these feelings of connection and that kind of thing. I've started to look at loneliness a little bit more explicitly, which gets a little bit closer maybe. So people do tend to feel a little bit less lonely, a little bit more trusting of other people after having a conversation with a stranger. But I have thought about it in terms of, who can benefit from doing this, because I realize, even though I'm here saying I think introverts can do this and enjoy it, I realize that people are sometimes very, very anxious, and, including people who are socially anxious to a clinical extent. And I guess I've started thinking that maybe there are ways to kind of work up to talking to strangers. I had someone actually, I'll hold that thought for a second. For a sidebar, I had someone approach me once, and she was some kind of, I don't know what her title was. She was like someone who worked with a person who had autism. And she said she found this research really interesting because she thought, maybe this is a way to sort of take a little baby step towards connecting. You can, I did this study with talking to the barista at Starbucks, and she thought maybe that's the kind of thing that her client could manage and could do. So, I mean, there is that aspect of it, that maybe it's a small enough thing. And there's examples like the barista where that interaction is going to be short and you can walk away, and that person has been trained to talk to you and be nice. Like, there's not going to be rejection. There shouldn't be rejection. It should be a very pleasant, easy kind of experience. So I think, maybe there's a way that this can help people who are especially anxious to be a baby step. But I think there are even smaller things. So I think the first thing is just making eye contact with people. That's actually how I started. Like, I realized at some point that I would not look at people. Like, I might make eye contact, but then I would put my eyes on the ground. Like, I just felt uncomfortable somehow. And so I had to sort of train myself by practicing over and over again to just look people in the eye. Like, that's where I started. So I think, that's the first step. Maybe just smiling at people is another step. Saying hi and nothing else. But, maybe there's these kind of gradual steps, which is a classic way that we deal with phobias, exposure therapy. Maybe this is something that could be helpful for people who do have mental health issues. But
we have a cute story along these lines. Actually, Amy, who is one of our chapter leaders in San Francisco, said, she goes, I had a parent specifically bring their autistic kid over to my chair and say, hey, he's really learning how to interact. This is great. Can he sit and talk with you? Yeah. And I think they've been back more than once, so that they had a place to practice, knowing that these folks were going to be safe, which is actually, I love that you said that, because it takes me to where I'm really of this mind. And this is, I said to you before we got on, I said, we've got to connect you with Niobe. I'm of this mind that part of the work to creating more of this connection and social solidarity is that we need to walk around as receptive people. We're so constantly, and I'm guilty party number one of talking. I mean, I talk too damn much. Talk too much. And so,
well, to be fair, your job right now is to talk. So
yes, but it's no secret. I mean, my husband laughs at me all the time, Jillian. Do you want to know what I dug out? Like 2 years into leading Sidewalk Talk, I found this coupon that I gave him for 1 hour of uninterrupted listening. No, he goes, don't you think it's ironic that you are kind of a terrible listener and you lead a listening project? I'm like, they say though that you teach what you need to learn. So, but I really do. What I have noticed is, one, when I walk the city streets, more receptive. So I feel like eye contact is one of those signals of receptivity. When I have a light smile on my face, and when I truly do, from a somatic, embodied stance, feel like I am able and willing, and we talk about this in our new listener training, to really receive somebody, and embodied in a very different, opposite of the capitalist out thing, I meet all kinds of people. And this is truly, I've had the last 3 months, really bad bouts of homesickness. And the people, I was just talking to my husband about it. The people that I miss are those people on the street. I miss Valerie at the flower cart. I miss Raj, who handed out the flyers for the Indian restaurant. And I miss Tony, who was the security guard out front of Chase Manhattan. Oh, and I miss Thomas, who was the doorman.
So basically your equivalence of the hot dog lady.
I have 4 hot dog ladies. I mean, Tony is so wonderful. He's amazing.
You'll find them.
Not deep. I mean, I know he likes the Cavaliers more than the Warriors, so we did have to have some conversations about that. But there was one day where I was walking by, and he just is always tracking. He goes, "Hey, come here." He could just tell I wasn't doing well. He just put his arms around me, and I just started bawling all over the guy's, security guard. I just found out that a family member was really ill, and then I left. And I just felt a little better. And I'm like, wow, wouldn't that be cool?
And I bet he did too, because he would feel good to be able to have been there for you. It feels good to help people.
It feels good to help people.
Yeah.
So
I think
go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt.
I'm talking too much.
Picking up on something you said, like I've just been thinking about how people, like if you wanted to talk to strangers, if you're inspired by what I've said and you're like, okay, I want to do this. I think the first step is noticing opportunities, which seems related to what you're talking about. And that's something that you can learn to do as well. So like that might be a step in these, stepwise processes too, is to just notice that there are opportunities around you all the time. So a study that I ran recently, most of the studies I've done involve a single conversation with a stranger. And like I said before, people report that it went better than they thought and none of the things they worried about happened. But people didn't seem to learn from that one pleasant conversation that they just had, that the next one is also likely to be pleasant. So I think it's really easy to just write it off as an accident, a fluke. That was something about that person. They were just really nice. And it's hard to get to the point where you realize the next one is going to go well too. And so I've recently run a study where I asked people to have a conversation with a new person every day for a week. I thought, this is how I'm going to fix it. I need to have people see that there's a trend. And of course, how am I going to do that? Because people don't want to talk to even one stranger, right? So I created a scavenger hunt game that people could have on their phone. And every day they had to choose at least one mission. And it was things like find someone who's drinking a coffee or find someone who's wearing a hat. So the idea was to just make it a little bit fun. And I think people like the challenge, and they also like the specificity, like having a goal, like a particular kind of person to look for, rather than, the whole world is my oyster. That's a little bit overwhelming. But my point is, by the end of the week, after having talked to someone new every day, people just reported noticing more opportunities to do it. So it's like these opportunities are around us all the time, but we're just not seeing them. And which is what I was thinking of when you were talking earlier. Just that, we need to figure out how to notice them so we can take advantage of them.
Yeah. I'm combining something that someone else has put in the chat and a question I have. At Sidewalk Talk, we have a stance that we're not there to help people. And a lot of times people will think, well, the only reason I would ever sit down and talk to somebody at Sidewalk Talk is if I needed help, right? Or the only reason to, when you say to someone, hey, do you want to be listened to? I don't have anything that I need to be listened to about. There's something about this idea that I need to be helped in some way. And, I have the social justice lens. And so I'm like, what is that about that creates such a power differential that somehow my connection has to either help you in some way or make me feel like I've helped you in some way? Like,
is it just that we need a purpose for it? Like we're just not comfortable with talking just for the sake of talking and connecting just for the sake of connecting. We feel like, okay, if I'm networking, that's okay. I mean, it's icky and awkward, but I have a purpose. I'm trying to get something from it. Or, if I'm trying to make new friends in a new place, there's a purpose. I think we somehow feel awkward about doing it just because. And I think talking to strangers can feel awkward. Like, I think maybe that's why we have trouble ending the conversation, because we feel like there has to be something more. We can't just talk for a couple of minutes and then walk away and never see people again. There's something about us humans that just don't like breaking the connection after we've formed it. But I think it's better if we can kind of just be okay with it being whatever it is. It doesn't have to last. Not every relationship lasts, and that's okay. So just enjoy and savor the moment and
so there's what you're doing though, and your research is getting a lot of play, getting a lot of press right now, because I do think that there is some hope that it will amplify people's well-being and reduce healthcare costs, frankly, to tie it to dollars. What are your findings around the lasting benefits? If I'm going to talk to strangers, how long does that happiness or goodwill last? How long does that lowered inflammation in my body last? How long does my blood pressure going down last, right? What do you know about that?
Absolutely nothing. So the study I just mentioned where I had people talk to a stranger every day for a week, I did a week-long follow-up to see if the changes stuck. So by the end of the week, people were getting more and more accurate about how likely they were to be rejected, which, by the way, if you want a number, people got rejected about 10% of the time. So it's pretty seldom. Like, this is people just out in the world approaching some random person and starting a conversation, and they got rejected only 10% of the time, which I think is pretty amazing. So people got more accurate about how often they would be rejected and more accurate about how able they were to carry out a conversation. So basically their attitudes became more positive over time about their ability to have a conversation with a stranger, essentially. So I wanted to check if that change in attitudes is going to stick around. And so I followed up with people after a week, and it seemed like it did stick. So unlike before, when it kind of bounced back after a single conversation, it did seem to stick a little bit longer. But that's the only sort of longitudinal stuff that I've done at all. It's logistically so difficult to do those kind of studies. Yeah. And so I have had questions from people about, do you still enjoy it and benefit from it if your expectations aren't wrong? Like, is it partly just that you're enjoying it because you're surprised to be enjoying it, that it's novel and exciting and you're kind of proud of yourself for doing this thing that you thought was hard? Once you've done it 100 times, do you still benefit from it? Like, surely your predictions at that point are more accurate. And so is it still giving you any benefit? I mean, from my personal experience, not my research, but, I still enjoy it. I'm still, learning new things from every single person. So I don't think that goes away. I mean, if I did it all day, every day, probably it would, but it's not something that we do that often that we're going to get tired of it, I don't think. And every person is different, like we stop getting that hit when it's the same. So the fact that it's different every time, I think, helps counteract that effect. As far as the health benefits, I have done no research on actual physical health.
It's all right. I have.
Thanks for the idea.
not the kind that you have, but yeah. It feels to me like you're really wanting to educate more people, though, on how to move past their lack of confidence at being able to engage in these pro-social behaviors. What do you hope is the impact, not only on the people that talk to strangers, but on our communities? What kind of impact do you hope you have on people's lives, Jillian?
Well, talking in the most optimistic terms possible. I mean, I think a big reason that people don't talk is because we have somehow developed these norms that it's just not what we do, which is funny because there's some times and places and situations where it is more normal. So we don't talk to the bus driver all that often. Some people do, but we do talk to the taxi driver, and we don't talk to certain people at the park, but it's okay to talk to the person with the dog or the baby, and we do, it seems, talk to people when we're on holiday. I mean, I've talked to lots of people who would never talk to a stranger at home, but if they're traveling, they talk to people and they come home and I made this amazing new friend. And I think, why was it okay when you were there, but not here? So I think there are, and one more example is just like situational example. People tell me that during the London Olympics, that riding the tube, everybody was talking to each other. It turned the city into a completely different place, and everybody was connecting. This was before I moved here, so I can't personally corroborate. But I find that so interesting, that there's this thing that brings everybody together, and then it's okay somehow. So my point is just that we can shift the norm, so the norm is, it's not the usual thing to talk to each other, but why not? So we know how important it is to have that sense of connection and belonging. Like humans need it. And there's lots of research showing how it's horrible for our health, mental and physical health. And we even die younger if we don't have these connections and this feeling of belonging. So we know how important it is. And we can shift the norm to have more of these kind of conversations. And I think, it could really change communities. I hope it is the kind of thing that would snowball. If you hear me talking to someone, I've definitely had occasions where I've been on the tube or on the train talking to one person, and, everybody else is listening, right? So it's, and I know people are worried about that. People have told me they don't want to start talking to someone because they are worried about the other people hearing them. But I've talked to one person and then they've left the train, and then someone who's left behind will pick up where they've left off, So I think there's lots of signs that people really do want to connect. We're just not doing it. So I'd like to think that it can spread, that if someone sees me talking to someone, having a nice conversation, that make them feel more able to do it as well. And then, if this happens enough, then, it just it's like we're helping to build the friendlier world that we want to live in. That's the way I see it. And like I said earlier, it's especially important. Like there's many groups that are often excluded. And so I think if you're someone who's listening and you do feel comfortable talking to strangers, I'd like you to think about how it's actually a gift that you can give people. Like you can give people the gift of belonging. And so you might go out of your way to talk to people who would maybe be more likely to be excluded, to show them that you are accepting of them and welcoming of them. And when other people see that could change their attitudes as well. So I talk about my dad a lot because he was another sort of source of me doing this research for as long as I can remember. When I was a kid, he talked to everybody. And as a kid, it was really annoying because going to the grocery store took 3 times longer than it needed to because he just had to stop and talk to everybody. And I found it kind of embarrassing, even though I could see how much he enjoyed it and how much the people he talked to enjoyed it. So I think I learned a few tricks from watching my dad. My mom didn't do it as much, but she would do it in very targeted ways. And when I reflected on this, she did it in very pro-social ways. So she was always reaching out to people who had a different skin color than us. And, immigrants from different countries, and just having a chat. It's not a pity thing. It's just a sharing that gift of belonging. It's just her way to say, you belong here and I see you and I accept you. And so she would talk to people who had different skin color. She was always talking to kids, like she talked to kids with Down syndrome and talked to their carers. And those are just people that tend to feel a bit more excluded in society. And so I think she just felt by having, a friendly chat that she could kind of give a gift to them. And I really admire that. So if you are one of those people that feel like I can do this talking to strangers thing, then think about who you're talking to and maybe deliberately try to be more inclusive and welcoming of different people.
Well, that's totally my stance. And I love that you just brought that up. I think that's great. Just you've used the word belonging like 4 or 5 times. And I was just saying this to someone yesterday. I think it's my favorite word, the word belonging. My whole heart just goes, because I think that's what I long for the most is that sense of belonging. And what I hear you also advocating for is creating the possibility of more belonging. And if we're all walking around willing to talk to one another and actually really keeping an eye on one another and looking and seeing who's maybe not being included, I'm going to extend myself to them, that we're just creating more and more of that belonging, except for if you're a teenager at the grocery store with your dad, apparently, then it's embarrassing.
I think my dad finds it pretty amusing that this is what I research now.
Because you used to really hassle. My sons hassle me all the time. Oh, Mom, that's so embarrassing. They used to come with me to Sidewalk Talk. Now they think it's embarrassing. I'm like, oh, well. But you know what? I was sharing this story recently. I said, you took a long time at lunch today. What happened? They were down at the market getting something. I said, oh, we met a homeless guy. And so we bought him some lunch. But what I loved is they sat and ate lunch with him. Nice. They didn't just give him, no, we just sat and ate with him, got to know all about him and his story. I'm like, okay, you still like Sidewalk Talk somewhere in there.
I love it when my husband comes home and says something about having talked to some stranger, and I think, I did that.
He's not going to give you any credit, but you're like, I know that I influenced that. That's great. This was really fun. I just feel like I want to grab a cup of tea, or truth be told, a margarita with you, and like curl up and just share stories of all the different strangers we've listened to, because I'm sure you've
That
got
would
a
be
boatload.
super fun. Yes.
So we'll do that sometime.
I have a very favorite story. Can I share it?
Can you? Yeah. Do it.
So this happened on the tube in London, and I had a really good day. I had done something exciting. So I had been invited to be on the radio. So I went to the BBC studio, and it was like this whole thing. It was very exciting. So I was on the tube afterwards to come home. And so I was feeling really kind of jazzed, right? So I turned to the woman sitting beside me, and I was like, "Hi, how's your day going so far?" And she kind of responded, but it didn't really go anywhere. And I thought, okay, it's going to be one of those, that happens from time to time. And then she turned to me and she said, "Well, how's your day going?" And I said, "Well, actually, it's been pretty exciting." And I told her what had happened. And then she turned to me and she said, "Well, actually, I was just at the doctor's and I found out that I'm pregnant." And so I was, the third person in the world to find out that she was pregnant. And, I was thinking, she's going to go back to work and she can't talk about this.
Talking about it now.
She's going to go to work and she can't talk about it because we don't do that. We make sure everything is okay before we tell other people. But it was okay and safe for her to tell me because, we're never going to see each other again. And so, yeah, we hugged it out on the tube. So it was a really, really special moment.
And she'll probably remember you the rest of her life as well.
She may not, but I will remember her.
I think she will. But I love that you're tearing up telling the story again. So sweet. So it must have long-lasting impact, because look at how you're reacting now. She lives in your heart.
She does.
Yeah.
I feel grateful that she was able to trust me with sharing that moment, and grateful to have been able to share that with her. Yeah.
It feels like a real honor, huh? Like wrapping it up, like someone telling you their deepest secrets and they shared it with you.
Yeah.
Really sweet. Well, I know we're at the end of time. I kind of kept you longer, but I also started late. Sorry. We have this little thing that we do, this ritual, which is I hand off the mic completely to you. It's not the BBC mic. It's just the Tracy Rubel mic, the Sidewalk Talk mic, to speak directly to all of these listeners around the world that sit on public sidewalks and listen to strangers, either a wish or words of wisdom directly to them.
Oh gosh, putting me on the spot, a thing that introverts hate. I guess I would just say, I think the idea of sidewalk talk is so fantastic, and I'm sure that you're benefiting from doing it. And I hope you're having some of the fun that I have talking to strangers. And you're also doing something really important by just sharing, giving people that chance to open up and share things with you, and giving that gift of belonging to everyone who comes and sits across from you. So you're doing good stuff. Thank you for your service to humanity, making the world a bit better.
That was like the best "atta girl" ever. I'm going to go back and listen to that sometime.
With the lame, fist movement and everything.
Because we need that. All right, Jillian, this is hopefully just the beginning. I'm going to be heading up your way as soon as lockdown's over, and I'll make sure and grab you and make you come sit on the sidewalk.
For you.
Awesome. We're going to go listen on the sidewalks first, though. I try not to drink before I listen, just then I'll never shut up. Then it's not going to be cute. But
I had a tennis partner once. He said 1 drink is perfect to take the edge off, but more than that is not a good idea.
Wonderful. And for those listening to the podcast later, we'll put all kinds of links to where you can find more about Jillian's work. And thanks again for your work in the world and how you serve humanity, truly.
Thank you.
And you should go back to the Facebook page. You've got some questions. They're sort of scientific-y questions, and they were long, and I'm blind, so I didn't read them all. But
I can't see the chat, by the way. So
No, you'll have to go back and look. And
I will check out the stuff on Facebook.
All right. Be well.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of your podcast. It was so nice to meet you.
You too. All right.